My name is Ruth Ju-Shih Li, and I'm an emerging artist based in Sydney, Australia, and my studio is in Jingdezhen, China. So my ephemeral series are autobiographical in nature. The idea started out as a meditation and slowly manifested into physical form. I'm not out to make any grand statements. I just want to convey my personal narrative. So a couple of years ago, a really close friend of mine passed away from leukemia, and then my brother and my father were battling cancer as well. So that really got me thinking about life, death, and the concept of time.
When I say the work is autobiographical in nature, that it's a meditation, it's actually a way for me to process a lot of these emotions that come from these experiences I've had. So in a way, it's me kind of injecting my emotions, complex, not really negative or positive, but just complex emotions of having close ones, go through cancer or passing away. It's just me injecting my emotions and creating these forms, these ephemeral forms that are brittle and fragile, and having that process of it crumbling, of it breaking while I'm making as well, but being able to process that as well, that when it breaks, to just breathe in and let it go and keep going. And then when it is made, to be able to step back and say, okay, I kind of release it from my ownership and then let nature take its course as well. So that way, in a sense, it's my meditation.
The reason why I choose clay as a material, not only is it, humble, organic, and mundane, but it's also really accessible. So, from the fine imperial porcelain in China to your IKEA cup in your cupboard to the earthenware chai cups on the streets of India, everybody at some point in their lives has had contact with ceramics. And it's also the most common material used for the creation story of humans in a lot of cultures across the globe. So it's that kind of, cross-cultural, cross-religion, cross kind of geographical context that I want to kind of utilize, so that people, no matter where they are in life or where they're from, they can relate to my work. And because it's a self-portrait, I want it actually also to reflect themselves as well, for them to be able to see themselves in my work.
So I draw inspiration from the Garden of Eden. So this is where all the flowers and birds come from, because in that biblical narrative, it explores the creation of life and the introduction of death, and in between that there is time. So I use that symbol, familiar symbol, for people to be able to read into the work. So all my flowers are fantasy, they're not real flowers. So I don't believe in copying nature, because I think nature is beautiful, and when you copy nature, your work becomes secondary to it. So what I do is I go out into nature and I absorb inspiration, I guess, and I go back to my studio and kind of remove myself from the environment, and I create new and weird forms that kind of are inspired by nature but are not imitations of nature, because then it's just a copy of nature instead of something that's from within, which is why it also reflects the autobiographical part of my work, because it's something that's coming from within and it's abstract. Yeah. So like many artists now, because of COVID, we are grounded. A lot of postponements, a lot of cancellations. So it was the same for me. At the beginning of the year, I think 70% of my projects were cancelled or postponed, and that was really heartbreaking. But I think the biggest thing for me is not being able to travel to my studio in China, where I have all my equipment, all my materials, and also my usual resources that I am used to using. I think that was the biggest thing for me. So being grounded in Australia has made me rethink my practice. For the first time in 7 years, I'm making and firing work in Australia. And It's been really different, that's for sure, because Jingdezhen is a really special city in the sense that the whole city kind of works as one factory. You have families that have been firing kilns for generations, and you have mold makers that have been making molds for generations, and that's kind of their skill set. And it's really different in Australia where you have to do everything yourself, which has been great actually, because I've been able to experiment a lot more. Australian porcelain is really different to Jingdezhen porcelain, just the materiality itself, the characteristics, the way it fires, the way you can form it, the way you cast, the way you assemble it is completely different. So that has been a journey in itself, and I've learned a lot. But it's also allowed me to experiment more, to try something different that I couldn't do with Jingdezhen porcelain. Because my ephemeral work, the previous works have been weathered down by water, I've kind of want to go through the elements. So this time it's air drying and it will crumble because it will be a lot more fragile, and it is suspended instead of sitting on a plinth. So this time it's a lot more fragile, so that air drying would help it crumble down slowly. And eventually I want to do wax work where I use fire as an element to kind of disintegrate the work. So I'm like slowly working through the elements, kind of like that, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually don't see it as a destruction. I see it as part of the process. So like everything in life, there's life and there's time and there's death, there's decay, but then there's also the renewal of life. So that kind of cycle, the endless cycle. So I build my work, let it dry, and it slowly disintegrates, but then that clay is transformed and reclaimed, recycled, and then I'm able to use the same clay to remake the work, like a rebirth in a way. So not really a destruction of the work, but more like a part of the process, an ongoing process.
So I'm currently doing a residency at Gallery in Lake Cove, Creative Spaces, and I have a show scheduled there next year in March, which hopefully I'll be able to create something I haven't done before and have an immersive kind of installation. And then later on in the year, if restrictions ease, I have a residency at Gimhae Clay Arc Museum in Korea, and one of the great things about that residency is they have humongous kilns, and they really encourage you to make really big work. And as you can see, my porcelain works, my 5 works are usually quite small, so that will be interesting to see where it takes me and how scale will transform my 5 pieces. Yeah.